Right, welcome to everyone. We've got the Victoria Hall Trust Committee tonight. We've had apologies from Councillor Zissimos and John Ball. Councillor John Ball is replacing her. And we've had apologies from Mr. Chowdhury. That's right, isn't it? Otherwise, we're all here. Welcome to everyone. Can I sign the minutes of the last meeting as a true and correct record? Everyone's happy for me to do that,
Yeah,
including the confidential part. Thank you. Yeah. Just to say, as much as we can, we'll do in public. But if anyone wants to ask what we think is a difficult question, then we'll go into private at the end. But we'll try and do as much as we can in public. And I think we're going to go over to Adam Whalley and Helen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to read from I've got some notes I want to read from that. I'll just to summarise the report for you. But thanks very much, Chair, for the introduction, and I'll try to be brief. So we've circulated a report to the committee, which really covers two main points. It's largely an update to the committee on the latest position in establishing a new scheme, which has been drafted by the Charity Commission and is currently out for consultation. And it seeks the endorsement of the committee to allow that scheme to move forward. And the report provides an update and confirmation for the committee on the outcome of the appeal process to the previous scheme, where we, as the committee will be aware, there was a decision on that scheme taken and published in September of last year. So I'll just move on that basis, Chair. I should hopefully only speak for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm going to invite Helen if she wants to add anything. And then obviously there'll be an opportunity for the committee to ask any questions of us that you may have. So just rewinding back to the last committee meeting in November of last year, you'll recall that at that time we'd received the outcome of the tribunal's decision. There was a decision published by the first tier tribunal in September. Since we met and presented to you in November, the appellants have gone on to apply for permission to appeal to the first tier tribunal. So the way the process works is that the appellants are able to ask the tribunal whether they're able to appeal it. The decision that permission to appeal was refused by the first tier tribunal, and the appellants went on then to escalate to what's called the upper tier tribunal, so it's the next layer above, and the senior tribunal, and applied for permission to appeal the decision there, and that permission was rejected also by the upper tier tribunal. So essentially, the decision from last September stands. All sort of routes to appealing that decision have now been exhausted. We've included at Appendix 1 to the committee report the decision which was provided to committee at the last meeting, but we thought it would be helpful to bring it back here today. In summary, that decision rejected the vast majority of the arguments that the appellants were putting forward in their appeal, and found largely in favour of the position that was being argued by the Trust and by the Charity Commission. The tribunal did partially uphold the appeal, so the appeal wasn't dismissed, it was partly upheld. And what the decision found was that the scheme that was under appeal needed to be remitted back to the Charity Commission to be redrafted within 6 months. However, the decision limited the scope of redrafting of areas that were lacking in that previous scheme to a relatively limited set of points that could fairly easily be addressed. I wanted to read to the committee some of the sections of the decision in full, and if you'll bear with me on this, there's only a few that I wanted to read out, but I'd emphasise, and the committee will be aware because we have provided updates all the way through this process on proceedings, that there was a full 3-day hearing which Helen and I both attended and gave evidence under oath at, which took place in February of last year. And that itself was informed by an extensive bundle of information and representations by all the parties, the appellants, the Charity Commission and the Trust. And just to repeat, the process itself was instigated by the appellants themselves. So just to read some of the key sections of that decision, paragraph 32, this is reading from Appendix 1 to the committee report. Paragraph 32, the Trust was simply not self-sustaining on the facts. The concept of the spirit of the original gift as set out in section 67(3) of the Act and the other matters set out in that provision was simply no longer achievable. Paragraph 34. The underlying charitable purpose of the Trust was not to provide income for preserving charity property, but to apply income from the charity property for the beneficiaries of the charity. Paragraph 46. The Tribunal accepted the Trust's submissions that the transaction with Masscraft Shurajogi was the only option available to the Trust in disposing of its land interests, and the viability of this is irretrievably tied to the charity property. Equally, that the charity could no longer operate on a standalone basis. Therefore, there can be no basis but to endorse the transaction, including the proposed land swap arrangement. Paragraph 48. Defining the boundaries of charity property raised in the course of this appeal is neither something within the jurisdiction of the Tribunal nor the Charity Commission to determine under this appeal or generally, nor necessarily required for the Trust to be satisfied that the proposed transaction with Masscraft protects the charity's interests. So those are the sections of the decision I thought it would be important for this committee to hear again. The evidence heard by the Tribunal which led to these conclusions included expert witness evidence provided by a forensic consultant who looked at 3 possible scenarios. The first was the Trust's viability under the current status quo arrangement. The second was the Trust's viability under a scenario being proposed by the appellants. And the third was the Trust's viability under the Masscraft proposals. What the Tribunal concluded, and I've summarised a minute ago the findings, was that the Masscraft scenario was the only viable option available to the Trust. The evidence presented by the forensic accountant also found that the alternative option being put forward by the appellants would be likely to be far more risky to the Trust's future viability than even the status quo arrangement, and indicated that the Trust could be in a deficit position of up to 1.5 million over a period of 5 years. I reference this because it relates directly to a letter which the committee has received in the last week from Mr. Miller, one of the appellants in the case, addressed to the committee with a proposal that the Trust consider merging with EPAC. This letter makes various claims and assertions. Helen and I will be happy to respond to any questions that the committee may have in relation to any of the claims made in Mr. Miller's letter. In summary, Mr. Miller's proposal is for the Trust to reject the Masscraft proposals in favour of an alternative proposal to merge with EPAC. The proposal Mr. Miller refers to was first formally presented to the Trust, which at that time was operating as a General Purposes Committee, in January 2019 and was rejected by the Trust at that time as being unviable. The proposal that Mr. Miller refers to in his letter was subsequently presented to the Tribunal by the appellants as evidence to support their appeal. As I've already said, the proposal that Mr. Miller has written to you about has already been rejected by the first tier Tribunal as not being a valid alternative, and the Tribunal concluded that the Masscraft deal was the only viable option available to the Trust. The upper tier Tribunal endorsed this decision and rejected the application to appeal. Through his letter, Mr. Miller appears to be advocating for this committee to disregard the findings of a Tribunal following a formal appeal process which he instigated and fully participated in, which fully supports the Trust's decision to support the Masscraft deal. The Trust has respected the appellant's right to fair process and has participated fully and fairly in these proceedings. The process has led to the Trust having been fully exonerated in relation to the repeated allegations made by Mr. Miller around conflicts of interest and illegitimacy of decision-making. As officers advising the Trust, we'd welcome a steer from this committee and any comment on the continuing campaign to frustrate due process and what appears to be a deeply cynical attempt to prevent the Mastercraft deal from proceeding to the detriment of the trust and with a disregard for fair process. Charity Commission has published a new scheme for public comment, and the deadline for responses to that scheme is this Sunday, the 28th of April. The scheme was published following a period of engagement with both the trust and the appellants, where both parties were invited to comment. It's a recommendation of officers that the trust should endorse this new scheme, as it is fully in line with the decision of the first tier tribunal. And we'll go into a bit more detail and we'll take any questions from you on this, but I think one thing we probably want to add, and Helen may say more, is there are probably elements of the scheme that we would want to comment, and we seek your authorization for us to do, but I'd stress that they're really refining points of detail. Just sum up my final remarks on this, Chair, just by reminding the committee, and I appreciate, you've expressed previously your own frustrations, that we're now in 2024, having first applied to the Charity Commission in 2017 for a scheme to allow the trust to continue to operate and exist. So we're now coming up to 7 years since that first application was made. So on that basis, Chair, I may hand over to Helen in case she has anything else to add to what I've said. But further to anything Helen's got to add, I'd be very happy to take any questions from the committee.
Anything, Helen?
Yes, I'd just like to draw out a few elements of the revised draft scheme on which the Charity Commission is currently consulting, just so that you as the Trust Committee understand what it actually means. In terms of the Mastercraft scheme and the details of it, obviously the trust and trust officers, neither Adam nor myself were involved in directly in negotiating that scheme, although we did advise the trust on what it would mean for the trust. I understand that the Corporate Council is looking separately as to whether or not they want to make any representations about implications for that deal. But what I wanted to flag up for you this evening are proposals, what the scheme says about particularly how the trust should operate going forward, because it is proposing, if this scheme is adopted, and as I said, the Charity Commission are consulting on it at the moment, it will involve a change. The Victoria Hall Trust Committee will not, if this is endorsed, if the Charity Commission approve it, then the Victoria Hall Trust Committee will have to change. And the way it's been drafted is there are two stages as the scheme envisages it. First of all, a period of, and I should have made notes. I'm going freehand on this, but there's a period of up to 6 months allowed, which is the period up until the leases and under leases are to be completed with Mastercraft. Mastercraft Shore-Jogi, we'll call it, because I think Shore-Jogi is the Mastercraft sort of wholly owned company that has been set up for this purpose. During that period of 6 months, the scheme specifies that the council acting as sole trustee must delegate decision making to a committee, which it has already, but it says the membership of the committee shall be as follows: 5 persons independent of the council and 3 elected members of the council. So that will mean that obviously the balance of this committee will change. So to the point that we'll have 5 independents and 3 councillor members for that period up until the leases are completed. The scheme then envisages the second phase, second period, which is permanent, basically. long term, which will involve immediately after executing the trustees of the charity will be the council and a minimum of 2 independent trustees, together the trustees, but there won't be a committee anymore, but there will be this sort of triumvirate of 3 formal trustees. What I was talking to Adam yesterday. I said I think I would like a bit of clarity as to exactly how the council should properly exercise its status as trustee. Will that be delegating it to one individual? It could well be, and then those 3 trustees will be going forward will be the trustees of the Victoria Hall Trust, and they will carry all the legal duties, responsibilities, requirements for independence. So I just thought it would be, I do realise that, as a lawyer, it's sometimes easy to forget that not everybody is, as we've attached the scheme here, but it's a bit of a chunk, a sort of heavy read. So I wanted to pull those elements out for you, so that you could understand that the Victoria Hall Trust Committee, as we know it, if this scheme lands, will need to change, and obviously officers will support you to make that happen.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to start off with any questions or comments? Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's a very helpful explanation, Helen. And I may be wrong, but that's not the way I read it. So can I tell you the way I read it and tell me why I'm not right, maybe? I get the point that from some point, and I'm presuming it's the point at which the Commission makes the new scheme, from that point up until the completion of leases, we move to the 5+3 model.
You've got your mic a bit nearer to you.
Sorry. I understand that from some point, and I'm assuming that point is when the Commission makes the new scheme, from that point until the completion of leases, we move to the 5+3 model, which you've described. Got that. There is a reference in the document to immediately after the leases are executed, the existing trustee shall be appointed as the holding trustee. I don't.
The existing trustee is the council.
Right. Okay. So the council becomes the holding trustee, whatever that means. And then section 6 goes on to say that the existing trustee and a minimum of 2 independent trustees. So what we're basically saying there is it's the council in some shape or form +2. It's not the 5+3 +2. Okay.
Yes, and that's the element, and it could be, and I hope I've made it clear throughout. Unfortunately, I'm what the trust has by way of a legal advisor. I come at a very reasonable rate for the trust, as in free. But what you don't have access to, because it would cost you a lot of money, is an expert in the finer details of charity law, because the council hasn't got somebody who they can offer you. You've got me, basically, and I don't understand how that is going to work in practice. So I had intended, with your subject to your endorsement, to contact the Charity Commission and ask them and seek clarification. Would it be a single councillor sitting down with the 2 independents? Would that do it? Or is there an expectation that there would be actually a council committee doing that separately and having the same status, an entire committee having the same equal status as I'm honestly not sure, but it could be that that's something that is absolutely clear in charity. I suspect it's not actually, but I was going to get clarification and report back to you on that point. And it could be that the wording needs to be more precise. I'm not sure.
Then we've got. Did you want to ask something, Tarek?
Yeah, but it's already been answered, but
Oh,
yeah. Thank you, Chair. It's already been answered, but I just wanted to know, I want to understand, you said this is up to committee to ask the Charity Commission about the trustees' future and more clarification, or is that what you said here?
Well, the draft scheme on which the Charity Commission are consulting us at the moment does actually set out quite a bit of detail, but I didn't understand how it was envisaged that particular element was going to work. So I was going to go back to the Charity Commission and seek some clarification, because the council wants to do right, to do the right thing, and wants to be, we need to be confident that we can actually comply. So it could be that it's blooming obvious, but I'd like it explained so that there can be no doubt, but that we're doing the right thing, because I know we're going to be very carefully scrutinised by local residents, and so we want to be completely above board.
I think we'd all want you to do that, Helen. I think.
Yeah, I was just going to briefly add, thank you, Chair, that Helen sort of summarised the detail. Hopefully, forgive me if it's obvious to the committee anyway. The intention, regardless of clarifying the detail that's meant, the intention here obviously is to protect from the issue of conflict of interest, which is, as the committee will be aware, has been a long-running issue in this case. And I think, as Helen said, we recruited. We've got two of our independent committee members here this evening, and apologies from the third, but that was a first go under the Charity Commission's direction to improve the risk of a conflict of interest. And I think what Helen's saying, and what we our recommendation and view is, clearly we would want to work with the Commission to make this committee or this trust structure as robust as it needs to be in terms of conflicts of interest. But sorry to labour the point, there has been no sort of evidence produced that there's actually been an incident of a conflict of interest in any decision making by this committee to date. So this is very much about putting in provisions to protect the risk of a future conflict of interest, and so that's really what. And we can obviously discuss with the Charity Commission, and we'll take their steer. We would suggest it would be best for us to take their lead really on the best way to structure the trust to protect it from that risk.
Speakers, Gareth.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, I think it's important that we do just reflect slightly on the ruling and what Mr. Wally has actually highlighted to us, because this has been a long journey for a lot of us. I've been sitting here for what seems many years, and listening to the judgment there, really does bring back, I think, for all of us, how we've got to this position. That it's as long back as 2019 I sat and rejected then what was an offer after the council had made the town hall a building of community interest and paused to allow people to put forward bids, so an alternative bid could be worked up to the Masscraft deal. As it happened, after 6 months, nothing came forward that was fruitful or was even a business case of any realistic opportunity of taking the trust forward. So the trust was left with only one option, to be able to continue. Here we are from 2019, we are now 5 years later. If we hadn't had this delay of 5 years, we could actually be in a position where we might be going back into the town hall. The Victoria Hall could be open. The trust might have some income. Instead, what's happened over 5 years is delay, obfuscation, from campaigners, no doubt well-meaning, but nevertheless, ultimately fruitless, to the point of which, and I was just checking back it was the original court case was held in February, the beginning or end of February 23. So I was just checking my notes. It then took another sort of 6 or 7 months, and it was in September that they actually reported their decision. And I know we'd hoped that it would be much quicker. In September on local media web pages, there's the headline "Campaigners Celebrating Court Ruling." A quote from Mr. Miller says, "I'm delighted that we've been proved right." They then appeal this, on the basis, presumably, that there was some sort of conflict of interest of the trust and myself and colleagues sitting here, which, I'll be frank, does make me angry. Because, to think that we wouldn't be sitting independently and that we would be sitting here as stooges of the council, I don't think is fair judgment for him or for others to try and justify, but here we are, a long time later on, and I am now delighted that actually the trust and members of the trust have been proved right all along, that actually back in 2019, there was only one option that was possible for trustees to take at that time, and that the trustees took the right decision. And here we are again now, hopefully moving forward. Certainly, I think the trust and trustees sitting on the table have shown with the Charity Commission's ruling that we're very happy to try and reform and restructure as needed to meet whatever the Charity Commission requires, so that we can go forward, because all we're actually looking for is the property of the trust, the Victoria Hall, to be functional and usable for the community. And hopefully we can now get on with that. But it's going to be a few years more now before, the developers actually do get in and the Victoria Hall reopens. So in the meantime, the trust is left without any income, and only with mounting debts. And I think that is a poor position for the trust to be in. And although, I know that they've mentioned they are the friends of Victoria Hall, and I'm sure that they are well-meaning, but certainly they are not the friends of the Victoria Hall Trust or trustees who are doing their best to look after the asset on behalf of residents of Ealing.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Ball?
Yeah, thank you. So I've got 2 questions really. So the first one is, we've heard there was a process of negotiation with the appellants to come up with this scheme, and I was wondering, and in fact it was required by the ruling that happened. What changed in this scheme as a result of those negotiations? So what were the key things that were brought into the scheme that weren't in the previous version that was rejected by the decision?
Helen?
The main change between the version that was quashed and the new version has to do with actually the elements that I was just talking about, the trustee, how the trustee will operate going forward. Nearly everything else is the same. That was that, and that really was what came out of the decision as well. There was the tribunal fully endorsed the Mastercraft deal, the need for change, etc. It was simply how, ironically, how the Charity Commission had recommended that the trust organise itself. That wasn't the council promoting that. That was how they said that we ought to do it, and that's changed a bit.
Thank you. Ian? Come back.
Yeah, so I mean, so the point that the trust should have a majority of independence is something that, I know I put forward when it was the general purposes a long time ago. It's something which is, should have been in there in the first place, realistically. But also within here, is the wording about conflicts of interest. And I mean, you know, I hear what Councillor Shaw is saying, and I think no one would say that individuals on the committee are stooges, but when the wording talks about conflicts of loyalty, then how can that be interpreted other than that councillor trustees in this initial formulation of the committee would have a conflict on matters where there's a difference between the council's corporate issue interests and the trust issue interests?
That's objective, Councillor Helen.
All I can say is that there is a very well-trodden path in terms of charitable trusts, charitable organisations, where local authorities are trustees, and even within our own borough, or almost in our borough, we have the Pitshanger Manor Trust, we have Gunnersbury Park. Now they all have slightly different setups, and I'm not going to go into that here, but the principle is the same. And Chair, I know that you sit on at least one of those. I'm not sure whether Councillor Ball does as well. I'm sorry. Yes. Well, I don't. I'm not sure what Councillor Ball would say to people who say that he couldn't possibly do that because he has a conflict of interest because he's also a councillor. It's something that is done a lot. It's a well-trodden path. I'm not and just in terms of what was in the original scheme, I should just reiterate that neither the Corporate Council nor the Trust nor anyone in this room drafted that. That was a Charity Commission document. The appeal was against a Charity Commission decision. And you'll recall that the council first applied to the Charity Commission in 2017 because the council recognised that the current scheme, which dates from 1887, I think, it's either 87 or 93, that, you know, more than 130 years ago, is no longer fit for purpose. So the council applied to the Charity Commission to say, please help us modernise, set things up. And we hadn't realised this charitable trust previously existed. Please help us put it on the right footing. And in 2 years later, in it was 2021, wasn't it? The Charity Commission issued their draft scheme. So insofar as we should be critical about the details of that draft scheme, it was entirely a Charity Commission document and independent of the Corporate Council and the Trust.
Wants to come back. Have you not had?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's just that, I mean, that there was an issue I can think of at Pitshanger, which I won't mention what it is in a public meeting, but there was an issue where both Councillor Shaw and I took a back seat because there was a conflict on it. So, there are situations where there can be recognition that conflicts do arise in those. So I wouldn't entirely take those examples as meaning that councillors are never conflicted.
Right. Councillor Shaw.
Yes, well, just on that point, I was sort of going to mention much the same, and that, obviously Councillor Ball and I, do sit on a trust together. If needed, then we can sort of step away. But I think also, trust has to be put in individuals to act in the best interests, as I certainly always have done when we've sat here, certainly when it was then the General Purposes Committee, but we always stated openly that we were sitting as the Victoria Hall Trust, and that we were looking at the future of the Victoria Hall, because that was the most important thing, and we've asked the Charity Commission for guidance, which they gave us. We've happily brought on independent members that I think have really enriched and given us excellent viewpoints, both Ian and Jessica and Dippy, who who is not here this evening, and I appreciate their input, and I'd be very happy, you know, to welcome, you know, another two, as is being recommended. If that is what's recommended, I have no problem with it, because I see that as beneficial. Drawing on others' expertise from whatever area and walk of life they're coming can only help.
Thank you. And now, Ian, you're sorry to be.
Okay, thanks very much. Just a further kind of sub-question on governance and then a comment if I can. You may not know the answer to this, Helen, in which case can we ask the Charity Commission? However, my question is the move to 5 persons independent of the council. Does that mean 5 new persons appointed afresh, or does it mean the existing trustees carrying on and 2 being added?
Go on, Helen.
My view is that we have 3 independent trustees currently. There's no suggestion that you're not independent. You qualify now, you'll qualify, you know, unless any of you are planning on taking up, becoming councillors, you'll qualify in the future as well. So, yeah, in fact, in many ways, you know, if you know, any of our existing independent trustees wished to apply to continue, it would certainly be a very valuable resource, I would say, you know, to have that continuity. So yes, I would say the 3 of you would all still qualify.
And also your background knowledge would be just useful to new people.
And just finally, if I
Go on, Ian.
can, sorry to hog the discussion, just finally, if I can, a comment that this may be just me. Just looking at the kind of transition in governance models from a 5+3 up to the point the leases are signed, and then stepping down to potentially only 3. I mean, personally, I just think that's a potentially retrograde step in terms of the management of the trust, you know, the holding to account and just getting on top of all the things the trust will need to manage. My personal view is I think perhaps the enhanced governance model in section 3A and B is maybe the model to go forward with. I just kind of put that comment out there. I think stepping down to 3 is possibly not a positive move in my view.
I don't think there's any public.
Yeah. No.
Anyway, go ahead.
No, it's fine. Just to say that the sort of long-term, sort of permanent model, it does say immediately after executing the leases, the trustees of the charity are the council and a minimum of 2 independent trustees. So the trust could decide that actually it's got 5 shiny, new or not quite so new independents and wanted to continue with that.
Sorry, Chair, it was only a quick, just to follow up with what Helen just said. I mean, I think, and Councillor Shaw's comment is very helpful. I think certainly we would, in a way, if we are to submit a representation to the Commission and say, we actually think we can go further than your scheme is saying, clearly that's quite healthy and demonstrates the Trust's willingness to go beyond the sort of minimum. We did when we recruited initially our independents. I don't know, again, this is quite a long time ago now, but we actually only were intending to recruit 1, and we had 2 good applicants, and we thought, well, why wouldn't we take two good applicants? And on that basis, we actually proactively went back to the Commission, who had initially, I think that's my recollection, Helen, is that we'd only initially been asked to recruit 1, and we actually were able to get people who came forward. And so we went back and said, well, actually, we'd like to take more on. So, you know, as an example, so to Councillor Shaw's point, really, you know, if you direct us to push for more independent representation, then, you know, we'd be happy to do that.
Yes, no, and just very briefly, you know, I took the point you raise, Ian, as that being, you know, an absolute minimum, and that actually the trust itself could sort of restructure itself into a format, you know, bearing in mind the guidance of the Charity Commission and subsequently this tribunal judgment as well. And so, you know, sort of looking to restructure it. I mean, I completely agree with Ian's point that three would seem extremely small to me for the scale of challenge the trust is now facing particularly with regards to the trust finances and no income available to it.
Thank you. And I remember when all of that happened because I came on at the same time. So it was good to have three people. Sorry, Miriam.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, because I just will echo the anger and frustration, but at the same time express some sadness and disappointment in the situation. Because before I was leaving work this evening, my colleague asked me what I was doing tonight, and so I explained the meeting I was coming to. So I tried to give her some kind of background, as kind of brief explanation as the whole situation. And then she just started talking about the wonderful things that you could be doing in the Victoria Hall. The community could be getting involved, things that could be charitable, things that could be just so helpful to everybody. And so, just really thinking about the fact that we could be some way down the line before we actually get anything up and running again in the Victoria Hall, before we actually get into a position where we can get ourselves out there doing something for the community at a time when everyone is crying out really for community facilities. And so really that's where I come from. When we talk about kind of conflict of interest and interest, well, really my interests are thinking about the people out there who want somewhere to get together, and if we can just get there as quickly as possible. And I just hope that we don't find ourselves in a position where financially it just becomes unviable, really. So I just hope there is hope on the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. I think that's what we all feel a bit. Now, is there anything else anybody would like to ask? Go ahead, Jessica.
With that being the only significant change, do you foresee any problems with the change in the membership of the committee? And then second to that, with there being 5 independent members, do you expect any members of the Friends of Victoria Hall to apply to be the other members, the other 2 members, say if us 3 were to remain, and if they did, would they not be carrying a bias, or can we not presume and discuss that yet?
Well, I think there probably is an element of speculation. Thanks for the question, Jessica. When I first thought you were going to ask, is there going to be, I don't anticipate there being any problems with implementing the scheme. I mean, one thing that we have made clear in the report is that this new scheme will be subject to a further appeal. So effectively, and just for this committee to be aware, there is a, and certainly the indications from the appellants is that they, typified by the letter that you've received, would suggest that there is a very real expected prospect of this being appealed, the new scheme. I think as far as, so what your actual question was, I think I wouldn't, I mean, clearly if we are able to get beyond this process, this stage of the process, and have a scheme that's been adopted, we would have to promptly go out for advert for 2 further independent members of the committee, which we did successfully for yourself and Ian and Dippy, and you're all really good candidates, and we'd hope there'd be 2 other people to join you with of a similar caliber and level of interest. It's from my perspective, it's difficult to speculate on who might apply. Clearly, I think we would have to take into account the independence of anyone that did apply for the role. So clearly, if someone had a declared interest in a particular position on these matters, that probably would be taken into account in their application. That being said, clearly I think it's healthy to have this is ultimately for you as the committee. We're your advisors, but clearly I think as Councillor Shaw rather has already said, it's healthy to have a range of voices. I don't personally think it's a problem to have people who would, for example, challenge us on decisions. Hopefully you would challenge us too. So but yeah, as far as I don't think I could say any more in terms of who might apply and what we might say if they were to. I don't know if you had anything, Helen.
Well, we have always let them speak if they've asked in advance to speak, or we've let them, so they have had a voice, and we certainly know they like emailing us. Councillor Mahmood,
thank you, Chair. Just while we are discussing that topic, to involving them, or either they could, the Friends of Victoria Hall. I think in the last meeting or meeting before, we were talking about to communicate with them directly.
We're not online, are we? Well, we are. Is anybody listening?
Yes, it will be recorded.
Oh, well, I better not say anything till the end, maybe. We did
Okay.
meet them.
Right.
We discussed it. We met for quite a long time.
Just to say,
Mm.
Chair, that just to remind you, that was an off the record, a confidential and without prejudice meeting. So yeah, just while I've got the floor, regarding potential applicants for independent trustees, just to reassure everyone, both in this room and listening, that all applicants will be professionally shortlisted and considered on the basis of the role profile for the role. So it wouldn't be appropriate to single out individuals or members of particular groups to say how they would or would not be. It would come down to the application and how individuals then perform an interview.
For that, and I'll talk to you about the other issue at the end. I think we've gone through most things, haven't we? I don't think there's anything else. Obviously, we would want to add on to the recommendations and notes that Helen approaches the Charity Commission and asks them, what do they mean by the council? Do they mean one person? Do they mean a group of people, etc.? So we agree that Helen goes ahead and does that. Yes. Otherwise, can we agree and note everything else? Yes. Yes, sorry.
So the other thing, sorry.
Go on.
Yeah, so I mean, the other thing that we've been talking about is about whether there should be a larger number of independent trustees in the second phase. So I mean, is that something that we can recommend at this point that we push? I mean, I think Mr. Wally is nodding. Yeah.
We're quite able to do that, aren't we?
Yes, I think we are. And I would sort of say that the trust, that would be the guidance
Yes.
to the officers here acting on the trust's behalf, to approach the Charity Commission for that clarity of just how going forward, what the role of the council would look like. You know, would it be sort of an elected member or elected members representing the council? And then obviously making sure that the independents are also reflected, and that the balance that seems to be, the structure that seems to be suggested by this ruling, you know, does sort of seem sensible to me, that the council is well represented, but the independents are also sort of at least equally independent, if not more so. You know, and whether that's a sort of, you know, 2 and 1 or 5 and 3, or, you know, if there were enough applicants and enough good people, it could even be larger. But, you know, I mean, we can wait and see how that structure looks.
Helen?
I was just going to say, Chair, you know, I think it would be better if I obtain that guidance and then come back. I can say that the period between now and that phase 2, that is, you know, after the leases under leases have been completed, is not going to be such a short period that we won't be able to have another meeting of this committee in the meantime. So I think that though that you would benefit from hearing what the Charity Commission, you know, because in my view, you know, the Victoria Hall Trust should exemplify best practice. We've always wanted it to be, you know, we've been ambitious for our trust, our building. So, you know, and we're, self-confessed, you know, it's not an area that, you know, most of us have got a huge amount of expertise in. So which is why we went to why we've been looking to the Charity Commission all the way through. So we want their guidance because we want to be the best. You know, we want the trust to be as good as it can be.
We note and agree those points. Yes, thank you. Can we turn off the live feed? And then we can report on the meeting.